The Game Awards 2023 has officially come and gone. Game of the Year has been announced, and we are officially looking forward to 2024 for more games. But I think I'm not the only one who feels a little weird after this year's Game Awards. It's been a few days since, and it's given me a lot of time to kind of think about my personal thoughts and feelings about the Game Awards, as well as see what a lot of people online are saying about it, and a lot of other people's reactions to not just this year's Game Awards, but the direction the Game Awards have been going in general in the past few years. Now, I'm not an industry person, I am simply a girl on the internet with opinions. But I thought it might be a cool video to kind of talk about those opinions, talk about my personal thoughts, as well as what I've observed over the last little bit with the Game Awards, and talk about some of the cheekier, weirder moments of this year's show. Hi everybody, my name's Alex, aka Qualitea, and welcome back to the channel. This is probably the first video back after my big trip travel vlog coming very soon. That was actually going to be the first video, but Game Awards happened and I really wanted to talk about it. Friends on Twitter wanted me to talk about it, so here I am talking about it. Now, because I know this channel is watched by a lot of different gamers of different types and different knowledges and different spheres, I want to give a little bit of a history on what the Game Awards are. Now, the Game Awards are an annual award show that happened in December of every year. They started in 2014 by Jeff Keighley, who had worked on its predecessor, the Spike Game Awards. Since its first year, the Game Awards has grown exponentially every single year. More and more people continue to watch it and go there live. The show is huge now. Like, when you think about the first ever Game Awards to now, it's a drastic difference. Of course, the main thing the Game Awards is known for is the coveted Game of the Year award. However, there are a lot of different categories for other aspects of gaming as well, such as Best Action Adventure, Best RPG, Best Content Creator of the Year. There's a whole bunch of different categories now that are really interesting and show just the diversity of the gaming sphere in general. But actually, the Game Awards aren't just about celebrating the games of the previous year. It's also about looking towards the future of gaming. The Game Awards is also the place for a lot of world premieres for big AAA titles to come the year after and even a few years down the line. This has always been kind of the interesting thing about the Game Awards, is the mix between the games and the announcements. Which brings me to my first point. As the Game Awards have continued to grow over the past few years, we've started to see a really big shift of talking about the awards and talking about games yet to come. And this has been an ongoing problem, but I think this year really showed how big of a problem this actually is. Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against showing world premieres at an event like this. You already have thousands upon thousands of people watching, so it's a great way to try to show your game. Some of the best games have been announced or shown at the Game Awards in some capacity, so it makes sense. However, it's called the Game Awards. And this year, the awards probably had the least amount of anything to have to do with the show. I don't remember the exact stats. There are stats that people have put together on Twitter of the breakup between time spent on awards and nominees and winners talking, game trailers and world premieres, musical guests, and celebrity guests, which we'll get to that point soon too. In terms of talking about the awards and winner speeches versus the amount of ads and world premieres, it's ridiculous. Like, I get it. You need ads to supplement the funding for the show. There's no hate there. But why even have the award show at this point in time if over 80% of your show is going to be world premieres? And my personal biggest gripe with all of these world premieres, and this is nothing on the development teams behind these games, but the energy of the show itself. These world premieres tell us almost nothing about the games coming to us in the next year. Almost nothing. And I get you don't want to reveal your whole hand right there at the Game Awards. However, and I think this year, even more so than others, has all been about the big cinematic trailer. Do you know how many games I remember from the Game Awards? Not many. I think I can name 2 that were announced, and then everything else just kind of blurred together as big sci-fi open world game, which is cool, but what else is there to any of these games? And again, I don't think this is so much a dev issue so much as it is the nature of the show itself. Jeff Keighley is trying to make this a huge production. And yes, I am saying Jeff Keighley, there are more people behind it, but Jeff Keighley is still the face of this whole event. And he's still making the big decisions about how this show is going to be run. The Game Awards have really turned into more of a spectacle than anything else. Every studio is figuring out how they can make the best, most realistic cinematic trailer for their game. But as a player, as a consumer, most of the time, these don't tell me anything about their games. They show off a character, they show off their maybe celebrity guest actor that's in the show. And that's like most of what we get. And I'm not trying to generalize all of the game. There were a lot of games that did seem genuinely interesting, had a lot of heart in them. Still, that took up most of the time of the Game Awards, where we're supposed to be celebrating the games that happened in the year that's leaving us. So it just felt a little weird to me. I felt like we spent most of the show getting almost no information and then rushing through awards like crazy. Winners of awards had 30 seconds to give their speech by the time they got up to the podium and received their award. That's weird to me when you have 5-minute long trailers that again tell you nothing, or interviews with devs about their games that also they don't tell you anything. And again, I understand why they don't want to reveal everything, but why slot them in for 10 minutes to ask them the same question and then get no answers? And yes, I am looking at the Kojima and Peele collaboration, which I'm so excited for. I love Jordan Peele's movies and I love Kojima, but what did we learn? Like, what did we learn about this upcoming game other than the fact that it's probably going to be terrifying, which is exciting, but they seemed like they didn't even want to talk about it. And yet, they were on the stage for like 8 minutes. 8 minutes! And we got nothing. We got absolutely nothing. And again, this is not at them. This is a show structure issue. I truly cannot stress enough how much I'm not blaming the devs or anybody that was involved to asked to come up to talk or anything. This is entirely a show structure issue. It was really kind of sad that Aonuma barely got to say anything in the one award Tears of the Kingdom won the other night. Well, I'm not getting into my own personal votes or anything, because that's gonna be for my Game of the Year video when I get to that in the next few weeks. But I really wanted Tears of the Kingdom to win something. I knew they weren't gonna win Game of the Year. I knew it was not going to win Game of the Year, but I wanted it to win something. And it ended up winning the action adventure category. I wanted Aonuma to talk. He was there. He was there and I wanted him to talk. Thankfully, we actually got like an interview the next day, which was really nice because it's like he actually got to talk about the process and Tears of the Kingdom and the direction of Zelda. But when you win an award like that, you want to be able to thank all the people you want to thank. Another big one for me that really like struck a big chord was actually the very first award of the night. Best Performance, won by Neil Newbin, who played Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3. I love Neil Newbin. I watch his streams. He's just a genuinely good guy. And he was talking about how important and how special it was that so many fans resonated with Baldur's Gate 3 this year and how it was the game that they needed. What happened at the Game Awards? He starts his thank yous, and then you start to hear this swelling music that comes in and is just blasted so you can barely hear what he has to say. How is that okay? Like, how is that okay? I'm glad that I'm actually doing this video a few days afterwards because Jeff Keighley actually tweeted about it, saying that he thought it was a little excessive. And I don't think that cuts it, frankly. It was not a little excessive. It was rude. You get all of these people here to hopefully accept an award, and then they want to have time to talk. I understand the Christopher Judge incident of last year. Totally memeable, very excessive, I get it, but cutting it down to 30 seconds per winner is just not okay. Even Larian at the very end of the show, as Game of the Year for Baldur's Gate 3, it felt like they barely had any time to talk. Now, I don't think we're ever going to get a Game Awards where it's exclusively awards. However, if we're going to continue to call this the Game Awards, I would like the distribution between ads and world premieres and awards to be equal. That's not even talking about all the awards that didn't even have winners come up on stage. there would be moments in the show where Jeff Keighley, I think in the fastest way possible, would get through 5 awards all at once. I can understand doing that for the 30-minute pre-show before the show, because it's the pre-show, so you take that time to get through a few awards that might not be as big or as relevant to the overall sphere of the Game Awards. And I hate to say that about an award, calling it irrelevant. We're gonna talk about that. I want to break down a lot of the different categories as well, but I think a few of you know what ones I'm talking about, where they're just a little weird. So I can understand wanting to go through a few quick ones during the pre-show. However, when it's the main show, don't you think that the winners of these big categories should come up and say something? Like just anything about it, rather than not even be handed their award, not even be invited up on stage, but to have their game or name said within 10 seconds and then they move on. It just feels weird to me. When I say all of that too, that doesn't mean that I don't want devs to talk about their upcoming games. I just want it to be a little bit more equal. There was one dev who I unfortunately cannot remember the name of right now, who told this incredible story about why he made his game. It was about his dad. It was incredible. And it was honestly one of my favorite parts of the show, because it showed what gaming is all about and what gaming does to people. And that was an incredible moment of the show. And I absolutely think it deserved a place there. And I'm actually really interested in this guy's game. Like, I'm very, very interested. I just wish the winners of the Game Awards had the same opportunity to talk about their feelings and their thank yous and their gratitude for the gaming community in general, because that's what the Game Awards are supposed to be about. And with this being such a year in the gaming industry, I really think those moments of gratitude and talking about like the process and thanking everybody who was involved in making your video game dreams come to life, I really think that could have done a lot of good this year. Speaking on that point, while I am not surprised that they mentioned nothing of all of the layoffs that have been occurring throughout this year and just the general scum that's happening in the industry, it still felt very odd. Which again, I think if they had given time for the winners to talk and acknowledge the people they needed to acknowledge, I really do think that would have eased it a little bit. But I mean, there were protesters outside of the Game Awards, and to get no acknowledgement when things have been acknowledged in the past, which I honestly think that's why they're staying away. A few years ago, during the whole Activision Blizzard incident, there was mention of it during the Game Awards, but they refused to mention Activision Blizzard by name. And that caused a big uproar, which I have to assume is why they said nothing about any of the industry layoffs, because they didn't want to point fingers and they didn't want any uprising. Because I can understand from that perspective of, is it better to say something or say nothing at all? Personally, for me in this regard, I think it would be way better to say something and acknowledge it and, you know, try to get people thinking about this kind of stuff. But from the unfortunate corporate idea of it, I understand not wanting to point fingers and possibly harm relations between companies. But I think the time has passed for that, if I'm being honest. So, but that's just my humble opinion. I'm not totally well versed in that aspect of it, but I do think that's why there was no mention of it during the show itself. Continuing forward, one of the other biggest issues that I personally had with the show, and I've seen a lot of other people talk about it on Twitter, how the Game Awards are becoming too Hollywood. Which is to say, people are upset at the amount of celebrity appearances during the Game Awards, especially celebrities that have nothing to do with games. And I agree, but I think there's I think we can find a happy medium with this. So most of the presenters this year, especially presenters for big awards, were celebrities. Timothée Chalamet presented Game of the Year. And this isn't a diss at Timothée Chalamet. I don't know the kid. I do think it was really funny that he looked almost exactly like the kid that came on stage last year when Elden Ring won Game of the Year. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but I thought it was very funny. Why did Timothée Chalamet present Game of the Year? Why? I actually think overall Timothée Chalamet was probably the least quote-unquote offensive of the celebrities that came up there. He was really concise, he was very quick about it, so I mean, hey, that's not too bad. But it is a little weird. Why are we inviting all of these celebrities that have nothing to do with any games coming out? I can understand, like, I know Keanu Reeves is a big one that comes up, but Keanu Reeves has been in video games, is a supporter of video games. Like, it's one thing if you have a celebrity in a video game and you kind of want to showcase them. But at the same time, a lot of these celebrities in these games don't end up being major characters, and if they do, then why does that give them preference to present at the Game Awards or talk at the Game Awards about the game that they're in over the devs? I understand the business aspect of it, I get it. But at the same time, this is the Game Awards. I can't stress that enough. This is the Game Awards. Now, on one side of this though, I am really happy that we're kind of extending a hand to celebrities that might not be involved in the gaming sphere of the world. Maybe this will inspire them to do so, or to do good within the industry. Who knows, you know? Maybe that's too generous, but I don't know. And I do think that there is an amount of like genuine like respect and pride to be invited as a celebrity to the Game Awards. But I just, again, I wish it were more devs presenting awards, especially Game of the Year. I don't know why it was Timothée Chalamet, I just don't. In my ideal world, it would be the year's previous winner presenting the award, or like something like that, where it feels more real and more special than just a celebrity who had nothing to do with any of the games nominated just handing you the award and talking about how it's an honor to present Game of the Year. Like, yeah, it is an honor, but why do you get that honor? And that's not to say that there weren't devs or other industry professionals presenting awards. I just think it should be more based in that way. We should have more people like that, especially if they have something to do with the category. Like innovation or some of the indie debut ones. Like, I really think that we should be asking those people to come and present the awards. Like, it makes a lot more sense to me, frankly. So I really hope that that would change going forward. I don't have a lot of confidence that it will, but I have hope. So, I mean, maybe there's that. Now, one final big thing I want to talk about involving the Game Awards is the categories. Categories are always a big talking point every single year. A lot of people have very different opinions on what categories should be a part of the main show, what categories should be split, what categories should just be gone with entirely. And I too have opinions like this. So I kind of want to go through, if I were Jeff Keighley, what I would do with all the different categories, where they would go pre-show versus main show, stuff like that. So, starting with what I believe should be in the pre-show, all of the esports categories. I'm sorry, I get it. Like, I understand why there are esport categories, but I almost wonder if at this point in time we should just have like a separate esports award show for the people who care about that. And that sounds so mean, and I don't mean it like I don't care about you esports people, but it's just I don't know anything about esports players or anything like that, and I feel like it's almost a disservice to the esports community to have these categories and then have people just vote for whoever, because I never know any of the people in it, so I usually skip or just pick a random person, whoever's username I like the best. So I do think these are ones that really should belong in the pre-show. They're words you can get through quickly, like how they do. I think their placement is fine as it is. I also think that Best Content Creator is another good one for the pre-show. We're not talking about any game in specific, and that's not to discredit content creators for the work that they do, because I think content creators now are one of the main ways of pushing different games and bringing them into the public eye. And I think that is absolutely something that should be celebrated. But with content creators, there are also several other content creator awards now that I think this is one that it's a great thing to acknowledge at the Game Awards, but one that belongs in the pre-show. One that I don't think will ever happen, but one that I really do think should actually be in the pre-show is Best Adaptation, which I think is a newer award. I can't remember if it was a part of the show in 2022, but with so many new game adaptations coming out in the form of shows and movies and stuff like that, I do think it's an important category to acknowledge. However, we're not talking about games in it. Are you kind of seeing the trend that I'm getting at? We're not talking about any specific game, especially not a game that came out in 2023. I think it's a great category to acknowledge. I think it's wonderful to acknowledge those actors. I think this is one that should be in the pre-show. A few other quick ones that I think you could put in the pre-show. Most anticipated game, 100%. I just don't see why it's a part of the main show, especially because it's always a category that gets through super duper quickly. So I think putting that one in the pre-show would be fine. You wouldn't really be missing out on anything. I also think putting player's voice in the pre-show is a great way to end the pre-show. And here's my whole thought on the whole thing. I think if you end the pre-show with player's voice, that's the perfect transition into the main show. You're talking about what the players and what the gamers want as their game of the year. So you can kind of sit through the main show with that in the back of your head of, hey, like maybe that's gonna come out on top. Maybe that is gonna be game of the year. Or, man, I'm so glad that this game that wasn't nominated for game of the year is now sticking out in the minds of everybody else. I think that is a perfect way to end the pre-show, frankly. To go through the rest of the categories, in a perfect world, I would want all of these in the main show. I think the remaining categories are all very important in their own specific ways, but some more than others. So, in my mind, if again, I was Jeff Keighley, I would maybe extend the pre-show by 15 minutes, throw in a few more ads, like to front load the pre-show with ads in some of these quicker awards, so that way the main show can be more awards and the big world premieres and some talks with devs. So it's a lot more equally distributed. And musical performances. I haven't really talked about the musical performances. I am not one to say no to a musical performance. I think we should keep those because I think talking about gaming music and acknowledging really good gaming music over the past year is something we should be doing at the Game Awards. Am I biased because I'm a music person? Sure, but hey, but I don't think there's any trouble with the musical performances. Maybe we move one of those musical performances to the pre-show. Again, the more things that you move to the pre-show means you're going to have to extend the pre-show. But I also think it allows more space in the actual award show. The other thing with the timing, which this is my last thing before we talk about the individual categories, I promise. The other thing about the timing is they're streaming this. Maybe it's just a matter of how long they could rent out the venue for, but maybe they start the show earlier or something like that. Who is imposing this time limit? This isn't on cable television. I get we don't want a super duper long show, but at the same time, if I know gamers, they are willing to sit through any long broadcast. Games done quick, that is like a huge marathon spanning days, and I know people that will watch all of it, So I don't think you're gonna have any trouble maintaining viewership if the show itself were a little bit longer. Going through all the rest of the categories, I kind of want to talk about the ones that I would keep in the main show, maybe move to the pre-show if need be, or get rid of entirely, because I do think there are a few that we can do without. And the thing with categories is, are they always going to encompass everything that you want them to? No. So you do have to kind of pick and choose and decide what relatively fits into a category. I get that, but I do think there are some categories that can just go away, such as one that shows up quite frequently in the pre-show, the best family game, aka the Nintendo category. It was actually really surprising to see not many Nintendo games in the family category. This is a really ambiguous category because what constitutes a family game? An E for everyone type game, a multiplayer game, games you can play with your family, games that you don't play with your family. There's not a definite thing here, and I know people have said in the past, like, this category only exists for Nintendo, and I don't think that's necessarily the truth, but I think it's just one of those categories that's just like, we have all these games that we don't know where to put them in, so let's put them here. Or they're games that might not win in other categories, let's put them in the family category. And that also just seems a little disingenuous, so I say we just get rid of that one, frankly. We also have Best Multiplayer. This one, I think we should change the boundaries of this category, because what kind of multiplayer are we talking about? Couch co-op? Online multiplayer? There's a really big difference between the experiences of those games. To split them into two separate categories, I think would be unnecessary, but I think we need to establish what kind of multiplayer we're talking about here. I believe Baldur's Gate 3 won this category, which I don't disagree. I haven't played it in multiplayer, but when I think multiplayer, I think couch co-op. So I don't know, I think it's just a category that needs to be a little bit more defined. We also have best sports/racing, which is one that I've never understood why it's combined with one another, especially because you oftentimes have a lot more racing games than you have sports games. Make it the racing game category. There's two different types of games. Like, they are very, very different. And if you're only gonna have one sports game in there a year, you might as well just make it a racing category. But that's just best sim/strategy. That's another one that I really wish that would get a little bit more screen time, honestly. I don't know. It's tough with some of these smaller genres, and I say smaller just in comparison to action adventure or RPG. Those are really big genres. Whereas sim strategy, it is a little bit smaller of a genre. I personally want to hear from the people behind them, but I do wonder how we can make that happen. Again, without just expanding the time of the Game Awards. Definitely one that belongs in the main show, and one I would love to hear more about, rather than just have it put in like a super quick reel of them, but I'm not sure how. Best fighting game, I think, is a really big category that doesn't get as much hype as it deserves, frankly. Fighting games are such a big part of the gaming community. And this is coming from somebody who really doesn't play them, but like, when you think about the foundations of the industry, a lot of them spawn from fighting games, so I think it's a category that really deserves a little bit more recognition, honestly. Best RPG is definitely one that should have somebody come up and receive the award for, 100%. RPGs are so huge, and I know there are still some people out there that love to discredit RPGs, specifically JRPGs. However, you can't deny the truth that is, RPGs are huge. It is a genre that has persisted through all sorts of hate over the years and is one of the biggest genres. It deserves to have somebody come up and talk about it. Best action adventure, of course, that is one that also needs to be acknowledged. It's one of the other biggest categories there. Then there's best action game. So it's an interesting difference between action adventure and action game. And I think it's another one that needs to be a little bit more defined, because action adventure and action games are two different games. They're two different genres. But I think they need to be better defined and better distinguished between themselves. Now, best VR and AR, this is a category I personally don't really care about because I don't do VR because I will throw up, but it's one that I personally just don't think it's as important as the others. I'd still have it a part of the main show, especially because it's a growing part of the industry, but it's, to me personally, it's not at that level where I'm like, oh yeah, this is super important. That might be my own biases though, so again, feel free to tell me I'm wrong on that, 100%. I think that one is just, that's like, you put that in the first half of the award show. And it's not one that, again, you just go by super quickly, but it's one that, like, it's not as, there's not as much fanfare behind the VR AR games. Same kind of deal with the mobile games, even though the mobile gaming market is something that is constantly growing. The mobile market also has a lot of problems. So it's one that I think should be acknowledged, but one that, honestly, if it got moved to the pre-show, I don't think many people would care. I really do appreciate the fact that they split best debut indie and best independent game. I think they are two very separate categories, both very, very important, because it shows the beginning of an indie dev and kind of like an indie dev at their like peak or something like that. And I mean, they can be one and the same for sure, but I think the debut indie category gives more opportunity for smaller teams to have a chance to shine, which I really appreciate that, because that is one of the biggest things that in my idealized version of the Game Awards, we'd have smaller indie devs a part of this. They're so important to the gaming industry, and I know we're still not at a point where the big dogs are like acknowledging that, but I think it's really important to acknowledge smaller teams, smaller dev teams, because like, they're the foundation. They're just the foundation. So I am really glad that those two categories have been split. They both deserve equal time. Now, one I didn't say that I do think should be in the pregame, best community support. Now, as part of the Baldur's Gate 3 community, I am honored that Baldur's Gate 3 won best community. Kind of like how I was saying before, I think awards in the pre-show are more for the people surrounding games. Maybe not any one game in particular, or just from kind of a more abstract aspect, which I think community support kind of fits in that category a little bit. It's all about the fans for this one, really, so I think that would be a good one to shift over to the pre-show. Best ongoing is another one I think I would put in the pre-show as well, just kind of having looked at it, because again, we're not specifically talking about games that came out in the year we're talking about. We're talking about games that have been going on for a long time. Sure, you could argue for it to be in the main show, but I think for me, I would shift it to the pre-show. It's an important thing to talk about to show how long some of these games have been going on for and the continued support. But if we're mainly focusing on the Game Awards talking about games in 2023 or whatever year we're talking about, I think it's a better award for the pre-show. One that 100% should have been in the main show: innovation and accessibility. This is such an important category, and I am frankly appalled that it was not in the main show. Accessibility is a huge conversation in the industry, and I think I know why it got pushed to the side. A lot of the times conversations in accessibility get pushed to the side, but I think because there have been so much controversy surrounding accessibility. Think of Elden Ring. That's all I'm gonna say. But I really do think it got kind of shoved when it really shouldn't have been. Like, the things that these devs are doing in order to make their games playable by so many different people is incredible. It's seriously incredible, and it deserves that main show recognition. I also think, of course, Games for Impact, which is already in the main show, those two categories go so hand in hand. Because impact, when you think of the word impact in terms of games, first thing that you probably think of is games that made you cry, right? Or made you feel something, or connected you to an issue that's bigger than ourselves. These are two categories that I find so important, and I really think that if one can be in the main show, they can both be in the main show. Even if they're not specifically like the same thing or anything like that, they fit in that same kind of bigger than us category, which I think deserves to be a part of the main show. Now, best performance, I could see, if people are following my line of thinking, that I would maybe put best performance in the pre-show. However, I think the voice actors, the mocap actors in games, they've always been an important part, but I think the past few years personally have really shown me how big of a role these people have in bringing these games to us. Because they, not only are they like, you know, the people behind the voices of characters we love, but a lot of the times these people genuinely care about their craft and genuinely care about the game that they're participating in. And I think that's really incredible. You don't always have that when it comes to actors, and I also get that too. Sometimes you just need a job, right? I totally understand that, but I think it's a category that needs to be acknowledged. The people behind the characters we love so much need to be acknowledged. So definitely main show kind of. Now, best audio design got a big thing at the awards, absolutely deserved. Why not score and music? This is something that as a musician will forever make me mad. Why not score and music? Why is that category always pushed to the side? Music is such an important part of the games that we play. People will remember music from video games from their childhood, and once they hear it again years later, they're filled with this like giant wave of nostalgia. It brings so much to a game. So does audio design, of course, but again, these two things go hand in hand. Why does one get the spotlight and not the other? I will never understand. Why can't we acknowledge these composers that have put their heart and soul into making this gorgeous score to go with this gorgeous game? I don't understand. I really don't understand. Video game music, I think, is a topic that a lot of people still acknowledge and respect, but they don't want to talk about it in respect of music in itself. It's more of an accessory of the game, or so people want to think, but it's such an important thing. It's such an important thing. Think about all of the games that you've ever played and take out the music from them. Would it be the same experience? I can pretty much tell you no, it wouldn't be. You'd be missing this very big core part of that experience. We need to start acknowledging the composers of the wonderful tracks in these games. We need to. This should always have been a big category, and it needs to be. It just needs to be. Now, I'm gonna go through the last four pretty quickly because these are all pretty obvious that these should be big awards. Best art direction, best narrative, best game direction, game of the year. Obviously, those four big awards, they need to be front and center. They need to have game devs presenting those awards. And that is all of the categories thus far. Would I add any categories? As of right now, no. I think we have a lot of categories that cover a lot of ground, maybe not perfectly in all regards. I think rather than changing the names of categories, we need to change the parameters around these categories and what constitutes for what category. And as much as I hate to say it, there might be games that might not fit into a category. But I think we need to figure that out rather than having more ambiguous categories and then decide, okay, maybe we should make this specific category. I think we need just more specific boundaries. But overall, those are kind of my biggest thoughts surrounding the Game Awards. It sounded really negative, and it kind of was. It kind of was. I'm not a negative person, but it's one of those things that I love video games. That's pretty obvious. I have a whole YouTube channel talking about various gaming things, but I want to see the gaming industry represented and acknowledged in a way that really pays tribute to the people that made these games and experiences for us. And also as a consumer, I do want to be entertained. I want to learn about the latest things in gaming. And I feel like the Game Awards at this point in time has come to a point where it doesn't feel like it's doing that anymore. It feels more like a performance rather than a moment of acknowledgement. And it wasn't all bad. I'm really excited for the new Mana game. That was probably the one I was most excited for. New Monster Hunter, that's always a cool thing. The Game Awards Orchestra is phenomenal per usual. Again, Pedro Eustache brought out the contrabass flute, which if you don't know what a contrabass flute is, watch the performance and then look it up. It's incredible. They're very fun to play on. And like, there was a lot of really good moments. Again, really touching speeches for the little bits that we got to hear them. You could tell that these people were excited and cared to be there. And I'm disappointed that they didn't get more time to express that to all of us. Now, do I think the Game Awards should end? No. I love Game Awards, and I really do think this is an event that can bring the community together. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen to make this award show like an actual award show and not just a cinematic performance of a bunch of trailers. And that's my main complaint. But I'd love to hear your opinions about it as well. What did you think of this year's Game Awards? Did you think they were good? Tell me about your thoughts on the categories too. I'm not talking about my votes because I'm keeping that close to my chest until I make my video about it. But I'd love to hear what games you nominated or what games you were happy won what categories, or did you just not like the show? Do you agree with some of my opinions? What would you change in the Game Awards? Just tell me all your Game Award thoughts. This is the whole reason I made this super rambly video, is to open up the floor for discussion. Have a Socratic circle or whatever. But that is going to do it for me. If you like this type of content, let me know. This was very freeing for me, to be honest, this very rambly kind of video. And hey, maybe quality rants. Maybe that'll be a new side show of the channel. Who knows? Who knows? But I'd love to know if you like this kind of a video. I do plenty of other gaming variety content, so if you're not already subscribed, but like the vibe here, maybe consider subscribing. I'd super appreciate it. But everybody, that is going to be it for me for now, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye! Boop!